guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's class we'll be looking at the data type in Python. Okay, what is a data type? A data type is just the type of value you feed to a variable. Last class we are looking at creating a simple Python variable for what we did last. So we created some variables to hold some value. Okay, so I told us that you can actually create any type of variable and then feed it a particular value as you like. Okay, and then this variable we created here, first name, we actually feeding it a value, and this type of value is a string type. Okay, it's a string type. And look at this other one, we created a variable age and we are feeding it a value, a 20. So understanding the different type of values you can actually feed a particular variable make us to understand what is data type, and you know the type of data you need. So like each time you are creating a variable, you know the data type that you are actually creating. Okay, so though Python is very sweet that when you are creating a variable, you don't need to specify explicitly the type of variable the type of data that variable will contain. So during assignment, the Python interpreter defines it with the type of value it is receiving to know the type of variable it should hold. Though in other language, you need to explicitly indicate the type of data type that a particular variable will have. So these are the major data types we have in Python. We have the number type, we have the text type. So in the number type, we have the int, the float, and the complex. In the text type, we have the string, we have the list, tuple, range, and we have the dictionary. We also have the Boolean type. The Boolean type is about true and false. So we'll look at all these data types one after the other. Okay, so let's um go over the number type. So the number type are three. We have the integer, the float, and the complex. So what is integer? Integer is all about whole number. So anytime you are creating a variable and you are feeding it with a whole number, then it is an integer. Okay, so you can actually feed any type of whole number and with any range. You see here we are feeding only one, here we're feeding so many numbers. You can also feed a signed number. Okay, a number that has a negative value is a signed number. Okay, the Python interpreter will still execute this, but to execute it as a signed number, and it is still an integer. Okay, over here, if you actually want to get the type, maybe you create a variable and you want to know the type. So we'll still go over the spider IDE to implement all this, but I just want us to have a look at all of them. So the integer is all about a whole number. Any whole number that does not have a decimal point is an integer. It can be positive, it can be negative. Okay, so it can also hold negative numbers as we are seeing here. That is whole numbers. Then for float, float is any number that has decimal point. Okay, any number that has decimal point is a floating type value. Okay, so just like you see here, 1.10, 1.1 minus that 5.559. It can also be positive or negative. So if it is positive, or if it is negative, it must have this negative sign. Okay, it can also hold numbers having this exponential sign. All of them are decimal numbers. And the last one about the number type is the complex number. So the complex number is any number with the J notation. Any number that has the J notation in it is the complex number. It's basically used in mathematical expression. So Python also supports holding values with numbers that has the J notation. So let's jump over spider and let's see how we can make meaning from what we have talked about now. All right, so as we said earlier, you can actually create different data types. So let me start with the integer as we see from the presentation. So if I have, let's say, num1 is equals to, let's say, 40. So I have actually created a variable holding 40. Okay, and this 40 is actually an integer. Now, in Python, if I want to know the type the type of variable I created here. Because when you are creating the variable, you don't need to um, indicate that this is integer. No, unlike your C++, if I'm on C++ now, we'll say int num. So you see, when I wrote this, it's already dropped an error because this is not the format I can actually show that this is an integer. So during this assignment, the Python interpreter prepares this variable to hold an integer number, which is this 40. Okay. So if I want to know the type of variable that the type of data that a particular variable is holding, I will need to get what we call the type using the type function. So I can just create another variable now. We'll say type of num is equals to. You will do that with the function called type. Okay, sorry, let me remove this. Let me make it as simple as it can be. So I'll say type. So this is the function I can actually use to get the type of any variable. So what I will do is I will come inside this bracket and I now won't pass that particular variable I want to know the type. In my case, I want to know the type in num here. Okay. So what I will just do, I will just pass num. I'll pass num1. So this num1 is the variable I want to know its type. I will just pass it here. But now, this particular function, what it does is it returns a value. Once I pass this variable here, it returns a value. And that value is the type of the variable that I passed to this function. Are you with me? So how I can pick that value it returns is when I create another variable. Now I say type of num is equals to. So when I create this variable and I say is equals to this particular function. So when this function runs, it returns the type of this number that is inside here now. And when it returns it, it will save it inside this variable. So if I want to print the type of this on the console now, I will simply just say print type of num. All right, I have a typo here. Type of num. All right, so then let me compile this. So you see that the type is of integer. So meaning that this is a whole number and this variable is holding an integer. Okay, so I can create as many variable as I want that is holding a whole number. I can create another number. I'll call it num2. I'll call it num2. Maybe it should hold a negative number, maybe minus 45, 46 or something like that. I can still want to retrieve the type of this by coming here and specifying that it is num2. Earlier I have num1 here, specifying that it's num2 and it is still of integer. Okay, so that is that about creating an integer variable and getting the type. Now I can also print this variable that I created here on the console. I've already shown us how to print the variable like this on the console. Okay, and then specifying the type. So what I'm going to do now is I have two variables here. I'm going to just write a little code and then we'll just continue. This will also help us to organize our code and then write Python code. So I'm just going to write a little code here. What I will write is I have this num1. I will just say number1 is of type. I will now print the type. Num2 is of type. I will now print the type. So what I want to do is, since I have numbers here, I want to do something like this. I'll say number1 is of type. I will now print the type, probably somewhere here on the console. So to do this, what I'm going to do is okay, I'll remove this and I'll come down and say print, and I'll say number one, or rather instead of saying number one, I will print that exact number, which is num1. Num1, comma, is of type, comma, and then I will pass the type here. Okay, so to pass the type here, I can easily and this is the type for num1, which is, I can call it type of num1, and I will come here and I will specify num1, okay, to make it easier for us. And I can get the type of num2 is equals to type num2. All right, then I can copy this, paste it, and just edit this, because I need num2 here and I need num2 here. Okay, so what I'm printing is num1 is of type, you print the type. Num2 is of type, you print the type. So let me run our code now. So actually see what we have here. 40 is of type integer, and minus 45, 46 is of type integer as well. So this is just how to create an integer and then print the type on the console. Okay, so now this function that I have here now, I can directly pass this, since this particular function returns a variable. So instead of executing this line and passing it here, which is taking our time, I can directly pass this function here. I'll say type num1. Now look at what happens here. What happens here is what we are passing at this particular place is whatever that this function will return. Whatever that this function will return. So instead of executing it here and passing it here as well, which is taking more resources than taking our time. So what you now do is you pass the function here, and what this other function will take is whatever this function returns, it will just pick it and then pass it and then continue executing. So this makes our code more mature and then taking lesser resources to execute. So if we run this now, you see that it gave us the same result. So I can also remove this and just have type here, and we'll have num2, and we are good to go. So, and it's as sweet as it should be. Okay, then let's now look at other number types, which are the float and the complex. So they're also very simple. So since these ones are integer, anyone that has a whole number is a float. So you can actually say num3 is equals to maybe 60.5 or 4.47, as the case may be. This is a floating type number as long as it has decimal points. You can also create a complex, okay, a complex number by saying num4 is equals to 7 plus j3. Okay, so this is a complex number now. So we can continue what we did here by printing these numbers, these two variables I created here now and their type. Okay, by printing both of them and their type. Okay, so I have to say 3j here, not j3. So here should be 3j. So I can also print these numbers and their type just as we did here now. I will say num3 is of type, I'll say type num3. All right, okay, let me actually copy this So I'll print that for also num4. Num4 is of type num4. All right, so let me execute this. So we'll have here that the first number, which is 40, is of type integer. The second number, which is minus 45, 46, is of type integer. 50.47 is of type float, and then 7 plus 3j is of type complex. So we see that we've been able to create the three number data types that we have in Python, which are the integer, the float, and the complex. So it's seamlessly easy to actually do in Python, and we've been able also to print out the variable and then their type. The next thing we are going to do is you can also convert from one number type to another. Let's say that the value you're actually working with is an integer and you receive the float. There are some operations that you want to use a float with an integer and it will actually not work. So what you need to do is to do what? Convert that your float to an integer so that it can actually work. So how can you convert from one data type to another? It is very simple to convert from one data type to another data type. We use what is called casting. So how does this casting work? So Python has three functions, which are the int function, which is like this. Have another function, float, is a float function, and we'll have another function, complex, like this. Then how does this work? Inside this int function, I am going to pass the variable I want to convert to int. I will pass it inside this function. And inside this float now, I'm going to pass the variable I want to convert to float. I will pass it inside this function. And in this complex now, the variable I want to convert to complex, I'll pass it inside this function. So it is called casting, and it's very easy to use. So how do I do that now? Now, my num1 now, I might want to convert this num1 is integer. I might want to convert it to float. So if I want to convert it to float now, I'm going to pass it to this float function that we have here. So to do that, let me comment this other two out. So I will just come inside here and I will pass num1. As simple as that. So passing this num1 here now, it has already converted this to float. So what I will do is I'm going to create another variable to hold it. Okay, so I can just say to float, just create a variable answering to float, and this to float is equals to whatever this casting returns. So I can print the output here. I'll say print to float. All right, then let's see what we have here. So you see that what we had earlier was just 40, but now it is 40.0, meaning that it has converted this 40 to float. And if I try to print the type of this float, it's going to give me a type float. So let's do that now. I can print the type of this float. So the type of float is going to give me what? Float. So that means that this our number now has been successfully converted to floating point number. This is still applicable the same way to other types. So I can decide to convert to integer. Okay, look at this number here. I can decide to convert it to integer. It is a floating point number. So I'll come to this integer and I will pass that variable. That variable is num3. Num3. Okay. So this num3 now I'm passing it to integer. I can call it maybe to integer, as the case may be, or to int. So int is equals to this, and I can actually print it here. I will say print to int. All right. So if I run this code now, you see that 50.47 has been rounded up to just 50, which is a normal integer number. So you see that converting from one type to another is very easy. So in case you actually need to run these conversions in your code, it's very easy to do, and it's seamlessly very easy. So from this particular class, we've seen the number types and the three major number types, which are the int, the float, and the complex type. Okay, I will have seen to create a variable of integer, a variable of float, and a variable of type. I will have seen how to print each of these variables on the console. Again, we have seen how to get the type of that particular variable. Okay, this is also important to your processing. You want to know the particular type of data that a particular function is giving you. You can use this to get the type. Okay, we've been able to do what? Print the type, and then we've been able to do what? Convert from one type to another. So these are the takeaway of this lecture. So I want us to watch it very clearly and ask questions when necessary. If you like our video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any question pertaining the data types in Python, basically the number data type, please direct it to the comment section and it will be attended to you. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.